Hello. My name is Katrīna Teivāna Korpa, and I'm really honored to be here today and open this symposium. Some introduction words. My field of interest is the history of Latvian photography in the very beginning of the 20th century and in the interwar period. I am also representing the National Library of Latvia, where I'm working as the head of art reading room and also writing a book about photographer Roberts Johanssons within the Latvian State Research Program. Today, my main focus will be on the information I have obtained about female photographers during my research process, which mainly is drawn to pictorial photography, Latvian Photographic Society, and its several members. I will also turn attention to most diverse photographic archives that are available, or more precise, so far discovered in Latvian museums, oeuvres of Vils Rīdznieks and Roberts Johanssons. My intention is to illustrate the roles of both photographers' family members, wives and daughters, significance in supporting and preserving their work. So this will be a very small excursion, more like notes about the history of photography, following the traces one can find about the female photographers in local photographic periodicals, exhibition catalogs, and also some photographs. So here you can see the vignette of the photography section in the magazine Stari. Photography, fotografija in Latvian language is in female gender, so most apparently this was meant to be a portrait of photography. Here you can see a studio of a photographer Jānis Rieksts, and this is most usual sight, a man behind the camera and a woman posing. By the way, this young lady is Vera Andersson. She was working at the photographer's studio as a retoucher, and quite often she was invited by Rieksts as a model for different purposes, checking lights, setups, poses, etc. However, it is known that there were women behind the camera as well. It is difficult to find photographs with female authorship because mostly these were family members of studio photographers who worked there as assistants. Also, after the First and Second World War, a lot of photographic materials got lost or were destroyed. Latvian Museum of Photography was founded only in 1993, so there was no institutional interest in collecting the photographs systematically in regards of the medium's history, more as historical illustrations of different subjects and events. And this doesn't concern only the female photographers, but male photographers as well. Fortunately, some photographers' archives were well preserved and sold to museums when this interest emerged. In the late 19th and early 20th century, there were several photographic societies in Latvia. As regards the history of Latvian photography, the most important was the Latvian Photographic Society, founded in 1906. Each society also had their press department. Especially, I'd like to stress a magazine of the Russian photo club in Riga, Fotograficheskое искусство, or Photographic Art. In the first issue, there is actually the only article I have found that is published in Latvia's territory and dedicated to female photographers, well, in the period. There is no author mentioned, most probably it's a translation, and the article is titled A Woman in the Field of Photography. First, the author draws attention to the role of a woman as a creative and practical assistant to her husband, a craftsman, or photo amateur. Further on, the author discusses whether a woman can be a great photographer on her own. In this regard, the female members of the Berlin Society of Photography are mentioned as an outstanding example. It was considered that the key motives that drew women to photography was their intention to document their children. Primarily, the documentary aspect is enriched and aestheticized by the assumption that photographic fixation is based on true and genuine feelings. It is a huge advantage of a female photographer because a male photographer is rarely led by such powerful impulses. It is also noted that women can be prominent landscape photographers, which is also connected with their nuanced world of emotions. For Latvian Photographic Society, it was magazine Stari. And in the first issue, you can find their slogan: to ensure that Latvians understand and love art in general and Latvian photographic art in particular. Basically, it emphasizes art or pictorial photography as the most important aspect in developing a national photographic school, thus allowing to include photography in the local art scene in general. This could also be one of the reasons why female photographers were so rarely mentioned in exhibition reviews. Usually, art photographs created in such techniques as, for example, in bromoil or gum processes, these were most popular in Latvia, were rather difficult to make. This is the reason why, due to economic circumstances, Latvian art photographers usually, not always, but usually, were professional studio owners, not amateurs. And as pictorial photography was regarded as the ideal of photographic practice, they were usually emphasized most. Well, but this is just a speculation. Here you can see some examples of Latvian pictorial photography of the time. These are landscapes by Mārtiņš Lapiņš and Jānis Rieksts. A photographic study of seemingly mythological motive by Eduards Gaiķis. Image by Kārlis Ezergailis and an ethnographic motive by photographer Rozītis. From 1913, ethnographic photography was another topical subject in magazine Stari, and it was also one of the main concerns to capture the disappearing traditional lifestyle and emergence of the new state in the 20s. There were two female photographers mentioned rather frequently in Stari and exhibition reviews in other press materials before the First World War. First of them, Emīlija Mērgupe, who is also introduced as one of the silver girls in the exhibition. She was a rather active member of Latvian Photographic Society, participated in its Women Members Committee, was an assistant librarian of the Society's library, and in reviews of Latvian Photographic Society's exhibitions, her works were mentioned as worthy of note several times. For example, in the second Society's exhibit, Mārtiņš Buclers stressed that Mērgupe takes portraits in natural environment, making them more lively and artistic, in comparison to using studio backgrounds that was usually the style of portraiture, also in pictorial photography. Furthermore, Emīlija Mērgupe was the only female photographer from the society who participated in the International Photographic Exhibition in Riga, organized by Fotografische Gesellschaft zu Riga in 1910. This rather successful event took place in the present National Museum of Art. Among different German societies and Russian photographers, the works of such prominent clubs as Wiener Kammer Club and Linked Ring Brotherhood members were exhibited. The exhibition catalogue allows us to discover also a few Baltic German female photographers' names. For example, in the art photography section, her landscape photographs exhibited Mrs. Anderkas from Lemzāle, nowadays Limbaži. Ms. Bāča and Mrs. Baglatsky, both from Riga, participated with their portrait photographs. Each of them exhibited 6 to 9 works, mainly images of women and children. Another acknowledged female photographer of the time was Emīlija Baumane. She was also mentioned in several articles about the Society's exhibitions. Her style was described as, quoting, praiseworthy in general. Both Mērgupe and Baumane also participated in the Society's group exhibits in international exhibitions abroad. Unfortunately, until now, none of Baumane's works are known. Here you can see her portrait together with an advertisement of her husband's photo studio. The resemblance suggests that it is her beside the camera. After the First World War, there is no mention of Mērgupe and Baumane in press materials or exhibition catalogues. And nevertheless, we know that at least in the 20s there were members of the society. Other Latvian Photographic Society members of Women's Committee are mentioned only in few reports, and usually there were 8 ladies, mainly family members of studio photographers. After the First World War, the Latvian Photographic Society commenced its activities in the late 20s. And here you can see also some press materials issued by the society during 20s and 30s, and some other societies that are known as quite active at the time. One of the main goals of the Latvian Photographic Society in the interwar period was to ensure the development of photography education. During the 20s and 30s, several study courses for professionals and amateurs were organized in schools, at the Society's office, and by individual photographers. The first 4-month course took place at the Riga State Technical School in 1921. There were in total 40 participants, 15 of them women. 4 ladies stated their occupation as photographers. 1 retoucher, the others were housewives, office workers, sewers, pupils, and teachers. Women were allowed to participate starting from the 17 years of age. For male, it was 15. Mostly female students were between 20 and 30 years of age. In the exhibition of Photographers' Society in 1929, there was a small exhibit of the Riga City Trade School students' works, and 2 ladies among them, Marianna Klūga and Lidija Maurmane. So here are also a few images of Vils Rīdznieks' photographic courses. The first major exhibition of the Latvian Photographic Society after the war was held from 20th November 1920 to 16 December 1921. Photographer Eduards Gaiķis conceived the theme for the competition section, namely War and Life on the Ruins. The exhibition, and specifically the work on the theme of the war and the struggle for freedom, was commended in various publications in the press. Nowadays it seems unusual that, in addition to words of praise, many of the brief reviews express a degree of surprise at the value of documentary photography and the force of its language. The only female photographer who participated in this exhibition was Lūcija Kreidsberga. Mostly, she exhibited ethnographic images and photographs depicting ruined households and buildings like churches and manors. Her works, mostly art photography, some also in bromo technique, were seen in the Society's exhibition in 1923. Rather important exhibition was dedicated to the 20th anniversary of Latvian Photographic Society in 1927, but none of local female photographers took part in it. On the occasion of the 25th anniversary of Latvian Photographic Society in 1931, basically everyone interested was invited to participate. And there are also some female names in the catalogue. For example, a few works of photographer and the Society's chairman Arnolds Cālītis' family members were exhibited, his daughters Līvija and Velta Cālītis. Līvija at the time was 13 years old. Also, from this catalogue, we can learn 2 names of Liepāja Photographic Society female members, Viktorija Grazda and Helēna Tomaševskaja. There is a mention of a photographer, Grieta Mihelsone. Overall, these were portraits, some landscapes, judging by titles, romantic pictures, ethnographic motifs. Viktorija Grazda exhibited 1 nude. So here we can see Lūcija Kreidsberga, well, the most visible lady first in the row, and a few other female photographers at the first Congress of Latvian Photographers organized by Society of Professional Photographers. Kreidsberga for a long time was considered to be the only female photographer and studio owner in the interwar period. Well, and that is not the case. There were several others, but for example, here you can see a picture from Vils Rīdznieks archive. The lady from the left is photographer and Rīdznieks student Olga Mangale. It is known that she had a studio on Tilta Street in Riga. Nevertheless, Kreitsberga definitely is the only well-known Latvian female photographer with an established reputation. And I think one reason is also because she did those very sophisticated artistic works. She had a very nuanced style with a touch of Art Deco stylistics. Kreitsberga was also a very good portraitist, and her works in studio photography can be found in several museums. Another significant fact, already mentioned by Schelde in the excursion, around 1930, the outstanding Latvian graphic artist Kārlis Padaks was invited to work as a window decorator at the Kreitsbergas photo studio. Padaks created striking window decorations, attracting the attention of the potential customers. The work environment and the fact that he was surrounded by photographers like Henrijs Bauers, Jānis Ozols, Kārlis Bauls, and the photographic equipment also encouraged Padaks to pose and to perform for the camera. And these images, some of them created in Kreitsberga's studio, is an important example of early performative photography in Latvia. At the end of my presentation, I will turn to the photographers Vils Rīdznieks and Roberts Johanssons, explaining how these two very important, large and stylistically diverse archives found their place in Riga History and Navigation Museum. Rīdznieks, in a way, has set an example in the history of Latvian photography. His most outstanding achievement is the photograph of the proclamation of the Latvian state at the Riga City Second Theatre on 18th November 1918. In art photography, one of the most praised works in general is a portrait of the mother of the Latvian composer Emīls Dārziņš by Rīdznieks. In his professional life and also in preserving his oeuvre, a significant role was played by his first and later second wife, also his stepdaughter. A significant event in Rīdznieks' life was meeting his future wife and business partner Marija Vāvere at the beginning of 20th century. Marija was a pastry chef from Liepāja. She sensed the artistic potential of Rīdznieks and decided to sell her cake shop in order to invest the money in setting up Rīdznieks' first photographic studio, Konkurencija, in Ventspils in 1910. In 1915, the couple fled from Ventspils to Riga, where they opened their second photographic studio under the richly symbolic name Clio. The name of the muse of history and inspirer of artists represented Vils Rīdznieks' ideal, a view of photography as an art and simultaneously as a medium for recording history. And Marija Rīdznieks played a significant role in the popularity of Clio. Her sincerity and outstanding communication skills attracted clients. She was the studio's manager. That Mrs. Rīdznieks was the life and soul of the studio is also indicated by photo postcards presented by customers with inscriptions dedicated to her. So here are a couple of pictures from Clio from the 30s, female assistant retouching and the master at work, adding the final touch to the portrait of the president Kārlis Ulmanis. Marija and Vils Rīdznieks actually got married only in 1927, and as photo historian Lauma Lanciniece has pointed out, Marija Rīdznieks is recorded on the marriage certificate as having the same profession as her husband, photographer. And here you can see her among photographers during their time while documenting the damage made by Bermont's forces. Marija would also often pose for her husband. She appears in most of the surviving nude photographs. There are also many portraits and everyday scenes. For Rīdznieks, the premature death of his wife in 1935 was a severe blow. Running the studio without her was unimaginable, and so the same year Clio was closed down. Rīdzniek's second wife, Olga Oša, entered the photographer's life in the late 30s. As far as we know, she wasn't taking part in his professional activities, but it was her who subsequently inherited the largest collection of works by Rīdznieks. From 1966 to 1988, most of the oeuvre of Vils Rīdznieks was purchased from Olga by the Museum of the History of Riga and Navigation, where it is kept until now. The collection consists of about 5,000 items. It gives an excellent insight in the history of local art and documentary photography, also studio photography. As pointed out, one of the most valuable items in this archive is the legendary image from 18 November 1980. The large format original colored photograph was carefully concealed in the Soviet period and then returned to public attention by photographer Gunārs Janaitis. It is rather significant that this image survived, especially because the photographer's stepdaughter Atāle Rīdzniece remembered how her mother burnt a series of photographs after the photographer's death, fearing for her own safety. Also, both ladies, Olga and later her daughter Atāle, were kind of famous among publishers and TV people because they carefully followed that the copyright of Rīdznieks' works would not be violated. They literally made it their business, and they always were on guard whether the copyright was paid. Thus, Rīdznieks in a way became one of the most earning photographers of his time. Valija Vilciņa, daughter of another notorious Latvian photographer, pictorialist and documentarist Roberts Johansons, also played a very significant role in preservation of her father's oeuvre. Johansson's wife Latte Johansson and Valija both worked for some period of time at Johansson's studio as retouchers and assistants. Later, Valija worked together with her husband, photographer Jānis Herberts Vilciņš. In his lifetime, Johanssons was very concerned about the destiny of his works and also works of his colleagues. In the 1930s, he was an active advocate of the idea about the necessity of Latvian Museum of Photography, which finally was established only in 1993. Keeping the photographic archive and passing it to next generations was very important to Johanssons, so Valija took over this task after his death. She even created numerous thematic albums with his father's documentary photographs, organizing and sorting them. In the late 70s and early 80s, she also sold the majority of Johansson's oeuvre to the Museum of the History of Riga and Navigation. To sum everything up, it can be stated that female photographers were somehow missed in the narrative of history. There is very little information on the efforts and work of female photographers in Latvia that could be used for further research. Yet, the few pieces of puzzle that can be found, mainly some facts on the wives of the daughters and famous photographers, or the very few commercially successful female photographers who managed to have their own studios, attest to the fact that female photographers had an entrepreneurial mind and they were eager to prove their professionalism in the craft of photographic art. They were also socially active and engaged in the activities of photographic societies. Of course, had not there been the history of 2 world wars and the following loss of valuable archive material, art historians would be able to draw a more accurate picture of female photographers and their role in the development of Latvian photography. Unfortunately, they remain intriguing phantoms in the history of Latvian photography. Thank you for your attention. Any questions, maybe? Okay, later. What you have?
Yeah. Maybe that heats up some other questions as well. But it's more the thing that I would really like you to share, if you can, is your experience writing the text for the Latvian art history book about early 20th century photography in Latvia. in this context of female history as well, because there is actually one reproduction, if I'm not mistaken, of Lucia Kreizberg's photography, and I think that's the only one that is represented by female photographers for this particular period. As most probably the Latvians in the audience know, then it's altogether a big task to write this history part, as there has been only one. There has been published only one book dedicated to the photography in Latvia, photography history in Latvia, which came out in 1985. So, in a way, there is this big task ahead, and through also these art history books that are now coming out one after another, to think about how to write about the history and what to say about the history of photography. So, could you just give us a little glance about your choices and how did Kreizberg's work reproduction ended up in this book?
Well, this is some nasty question, I have to say. I think mostly it's pretty circumstantial, because you go to a museum, you ask, what do you have? Then you have to explain what you need. Sometimes you don't know what you need. Or in my particular case, I was really looking into art photography, not found photography, not photography in general. I was following really the official photography history, also what I did in this presentation, searching material connected to photographic societies, and my task was to describe really art photography. And Kreizberg's work is the only artistic, from means not what we see as artistic nowadays, but what was seen as artistic back in the day, and that was rather important. The selection, of works, it was also rather interesting, because in the process of research I found out that there were some other experimental activities, so you had to show in several pictures, more or less, the variety. And so, there was one picture of Kreizberg, but hopefully you will issue this album and we can see so much more, and it will be a great addition to the researchers as well. Anything else?
Okay, maybe later. Maybe later.